it's Mo. This is B is for Behavior. It's been a while since I've posted, but I am back at it now. So I wanted to jump into a video about CalABA. For those of you who don't know what CalABA is, it's the California Association for Behavior Analysis. And it's a statewide organization, but they have people come to this conference from all over the United States and the world. I've met some people from Europe and obviously different parts of the United States. So it's pretty cool. It's the second largest conference for behavior analysis apart from ABAI, which is Applied Behavior Analysis International, which is even bigger. But this conference has gotten pretty large over the last few years. I've been going for 4 years, so I've seen it grow quite a bit in those 4 years. It's gotten so big that they have really had to be pretty picky about which venues they're at so that the room sizes are large enough to accommodate the large group sizes. So I went to that over the weekend, and as always, I got a lot of really valuable information and valuable reminders. Sometimes when you're getting into the work, it's easy to lose track of what your focus is or what you're trying to do. So it's nice to go to this, kind of melting pot where everybody is like-minded and shares some of the same background knowledge that you have, and you can troubleshoot things with them and talk to presenters who have done research and have a lot of experience in these areas. It's very exciting. So I focused my time there on seminars that focused on education. So, specifically public education and how behavior analysis plays a role in public education. So the first seminar that I went to was the keynote presentation, which I didn't expect to be focused on schools, but it actually was. It talked about specific suggestions for teachers and neurodiversity, which I really thought was nice. It talked about how we can make accommodations in the classroom to suit the needs of our students. Also, that we need to prioritize. So really tackling one thing at a time. What's the one thing that we can address that's going to make the biggest impact? The students who are deficit in those areas are going to need more repetitions. They're going to need practice with these skills. They're going to need to hear it and do it more often than their typically developing peers. So thinking about how we're going to address those specific skill and learning deficits, and also suggestions for parents as well. So it talked a bit about how to keep parents on board, get their buy-in, and see what things are priorities for them, and how we can incorporate those things into the school setting as well. It also talked about finding behavior that produces functional reinforcement, so reinforcement that is going to occur in the natural environment. So, for example, it would be teaching a student to, show completed work to peers. That's going to automatically get them attention. It's also, a functional way to get praise from others. So just, targeting skills like that where they can get naturally occurring reinforcement, and they're not always going to depend on another person to be there to facilitate that reinforcement exchange. So focusing on those types of things that are going to produce more, long-term benefits to the student. There's a very good example from the Hoffland Learning Center. Hoffland is Haughland Learning Center. It looks like they have maybe some training videos on that website, but it shows using direct instruction. So some of you might be familiar with direct instruction, but it's really explicit interaction with the students as you're teaching. So it requires a lot of responses from them. They're very actively engaged. So whether that's by them raising their hands, them, holding up a number of fingers, holding up whiteboards, holding up response cards, all, choral responding all together. So it has a few different examples of teachers using direct instruction to, encourage student learning and keep students on task. One of the best ways to decrease problem behavior in the classroom is from the use of OTRs. opportunities to respond, and those, can be any of the things that I listed before, but the direct instruction is a great way to use the OTRs and, see a big increase in on-task behavior. You get those repetitions and you get the immediate feedback, so if the students are learning the concepts or not, or if you need to go back and reteach. So I really liked those video examples. If you are looking for some, maybe to show staff or even for your own reference, the Hoffland Learning Center had some really great examples. Also for parents, it talked about being involved in your child's program. So if your student is on an IEP, then it's very important that you're asking for the data, that you're asking to see it, because schools get busy, and I know it. I've been there. It gets really busy and you don't want to lose sight of that data. So as a parent, it's important to make sure that you're asking staff to see the data and doing, check-ins, because you don't want to wait for the IEP to come and then all of a sudden there's no data, or the data is just one sample pulled from the entire year. So you really want to make sure that you're getting, continuous data check-ins. It's very important to do that and be a part of that process, a part of the goal monitoring. Also, giving your student access to work experience. So it's something that you can talk with the staff about, giving your child an opportunity to help, to, do different things on campus or even volunteer work, but just getting some hands-on work experience to help, when they do eventually graduate their school programs, that way they'll have some experience and some ways to contribute to the community and, try to sustain themselves a little bit more independently. So the next seminar that I went to was called Behavioral Services in Public Schools, and it talked a lot about ed code, which was actually really beneficial because that's one thing that I really would like to know more about. I'm not very fluent with ed code, especially as it applies to special ed versus gen ed. So I'm going to read from my notes so that I don't misspeak. But she looked specifically, her name was Kristen Wright from the California Department of Education. She looked specifically at California Education Code section 33080. And that talks about really that what the Department of Education is going towards is eliminating special ed and creating an umbrella for all students under general education. And so for me, that was really difficult to conceptualize, all of those services and everything that are enclosed under special ed would then become available to anyone who needed them, which I think is great. But at the same time, I feel like there would be some sort of fiscal commitment involved because of the large, population of students that we have and the number of assessments that are usually required to get access to those services. So I thought that was very interesting, but evidently that's something that they're looking to change is, the whole delineation of gen ed versus special ed, and how can we make these services available to everyone as needed as a general education student. What they have found is that it's very difficult for children to transition from those programs to general education programs and not, demonstrate some difficulties with that process. So independence primarily, and lack of social skills and things like that. So they're trying to kind of create more of an umbrella, which I thought was an interesting idea. This seminar also talked about behavioral strategies that work in the school environment and some that don't. So one specifically that they pointed out was extinction, how it's rarely effective in the school environment because there's so many different environmental variables that we can't control for. So, a student who is engaging in a behavior for attention, the teacher might ignore it, but students are, likely going to pay attention to it. It's very difficult for us to cut off all attention from everyone around. Also, if we're doing extinction, we're likely to see an extinction burst, and those things are very hard to control for in the school environment. There are some specialized classrooms that can control for those a little bit more, but especially in the gen ed environment, if we're seeing an extinction burst, that's going to be very difficult for a general education teacher to monitor and handle. So extinction is not really, should not be a strategy that we are using in the school environment. And we should primarily look at response interruption and redirection, prompting replacement behaviors, and how we can use reinforcement and high P sequences to build that appropriate behavior instead of relying on extinction, which is absolutely true. Working in the school environment, I would not recommend a general education teacher use extinction on for a student with one of my behavior plans. And lastly, for that one, I really liked how it talked about creating a culture of acceptance. It talked about, given that they want to integrate more special education services into the general education environment, really explaining differences to children early on and helping them to be supportive of their peers, creating a school-wide culture that encourages connection and support instead of points out differences and kind of scapegoats those who aren't performing at grade level or behaving the way that they should in the classroom, but supporting them to find the positive, appropriate behavior that they should be doing, acting as role models instead of, as police officers. Not that there's anything wrong with police officers, but, just that we're teaching them to be supportive and collaborative with their classmates. So I liked that because that really kind of ties into PBIS, positive behavior interventions at schools. So I liked that they pointed that out. So the next seminar that I went to was entitled Education is a Public Health Issue. So immediately the title grabbed my attention. The presenter's name was Ronnie Detrich, Detrich, from the Wing Institute. He had a lot of really great information and statistics. I know as behaviorists, we don't use really statistics. We like to look at hard data, but he did use some interesting statistics and numbers that I wanted to share. So one of them was 50% of teacher preparation programs only teach one of the 14 ways to engage your class that are proven by research as evidence-based practices. So only one of those strategies are taught in at least 50% of teacher preparation programs. So this is just to give us an idea of, kind of where teachers are coming from and where the support is needed when we go into to coach them. We really need to teach those other strategies on how to, manage behavior in the classroom as a whole, not just for one student, but for the entire class. What are some ways that we can manage behavior? Also, 70% of prison inmates do not have high school diplomas. So really what he was looking at there was the way to keep people out of prison is to educate them. And really we should be looking at education as our primary defense against having so many people imprisoned. So we should be, really trying to look at education more as that kind of putting education as the quote that he uses, education is the civil rights issue of our generation, which I do believe to be true. I think there's a lot that needs to change with education. He also gave some numbers just to give an idea of how many students that are being served. There's 50 million in America in public schools. 6 million of those students are in special ed, and there are 3 million teachers. So we really need to kind of think about, are those 6 million students in special education getting the effective instruction that they need? So we know that students who are in special education, they need more direct instruction, they need more repetitions, they need more practice. Is that happening? And are those teachers who are teaching, are they prepared? Are they prepared to manage those classrooms? Are they prepared to give that adequate instruction? Or do they know what those strategies are? And if not, that's what we're there for. We're there to help them learn and to help teach those teachers how to use those skills. He also said something really interesting about the behavior analyst thinking of themselves as a cultural anthropologist. So really learning about the populations that we're teaching and how to reach them, because really how we communicate to different populations is going to affect the way that we're able to disseminate information. So the more adequately prepared we are to talk with people, the better our responses will be. So just thinking of ourselves in that way, I thought was really interesting too, because you do have to spend a lot of time reflecting on the population that you're serving and thinking about the message that you're giving, whether or not it's going to be well received. He also spoke on getting away from some of the jargon that we're using, and I'll address this a little bit more later in the video, but moving away from jargon and going more toward layman's terms. So explaining things to people in a way that they understand, instead of, going in and saying reinforcement, saying giving positives to increase the likelihood of the behavior, which is absolutely, we should define those terms. But he made the comparison of a sunset. He showed a picture of a sunset, and he said, I'm sure that if you were with an astronomer and you called it a sunset, they wouldn't correct you and tell you the sun doesn't really set. This is a blah, 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 blah. So he kind of made that comparison that, we shouldn't go around correcting everybody to using the correct language. What we should really be focusing on is the concept. He also shared some research that if you, instead of giving numbers and giving research to others, if you share an emotional story, you're likely to see better outcomes 60% of the time. So I thought that was interesting. So tying something like some statistic or research that you're giving to like an emotional story or something that resonates with the person you're talking to, so maybe something that they might experience, it's more likely to resonate with them. Also, he shared research that 60% of behavior analytic terms are rated unpleasantly. So people feel that they're aversive. So, important for us to know, right, that some of the language that we're using can be make people uncomfortable, or it can be aversive for them. But I kind of liken that to any specialized field where you're using that technical language. My husband is in the computer science field, and sometimes he uses words and I'm just like, what are you talking about? I feel like he's speaking another language, but then when he explains it to me, I feel more comfortable. It makes more sense, and then maybe that's language that I can use in the future as well. He's educating me on how to use those terms. But anyway, so 60% of them rated unpleasantly, and I'd be curious to see how that compares to other fields. If the language that, if they're using their technical language, if it would make the general population feel unpleasantly as well as behavior analytic language. And he also, one final point is he talked about leading from behind. And this I definitely do find to be true. I think sometimes you plant an idea and the immediate response is, no, that's not going to work. That's a very bad idea. This is going to go wrong. That's going to go wrong. The other kids are going to see it. They're going to say it's unfair. And so, sometimes you just explain it the best you can, and even then they still say no. But then a couple weeks later, you see that they're doing it. And you don't say, hey, I told you so. You say, oh, thank goodness, right? You just kind of accept that maybe it took them some time. It took them some time to come to terms with it and, see that this is really a beneficial way to do things. It's like, looking at a cost benefit, right? If you're having to put more time and effort into the student now, the benefit is them, coming out with this positive behavior, whereas you can continue with what you're doing right now, but you're not really going to see a benefit. You're just going to continue to see the same behavior that you're seeing. So I really like that lead from behind, that, maybe we don't always get the credit, maybe we don't always get the commendations, but we know, right? We know where that idea came from. And yes, we knew that it would work, but we didn't, want to be too aggressive in our stance, because sometimes that just turns out in the opposite way. We just want to coach and support and try to help others see the light. Sometimes I'll even, I'll go in and do the thing, I'll show them the thing and hope that they're watching, while they're teaching class and thinking, oh, that does really work. And sometimes when they see it, when they see the success, they're more likely to believe it, because just talking about it doesn't always drive the point home, but seeing it work, that changes their mind. The last one that I went to for that day was inpatient psychiatric treatment. So I really have always been interested in being a behaviorist in an inpatient facility. That's kind of something that I really wanted to do. I haven't had the opportunity to do it. So I also have had some students who've been, who've had to go to inpatient facilities. And so I was kind of curious about, how those ran. This group who presented was from Ohio, so really encouraging everyone to go to CalABA, Ohio ABA. So it's a conference that they have there, I guess. But they talked about the different systems that they use there, and how they got nurses to buy in, and now they even had a nurse on the panel presenting with them who was saying that she uses the reinforcement systems. Basically, they started a token system, and that changed everything. And it's just amazing to hear that such a simple modification, once you have everybody on board, can make such a big difference. And hearing them say that some nurses were saying it's not working, and it's, well, is the system not working, or is the fidelity not there? So kind of going back to, are you checking in to make sure that it's actually the system, that the students aren't responding to the system, or that the staff aren't implementing correctly? So they didn't talk specifically about BST, behavior skills training. They did refer a lot to that, model lead test, where they're showing them how to do it, leading them through it, and then giving them the opportunity to do it independently. They also did some staff training and development around it, where, outside of their shift times, they would do some training and some kind of, foundation laying on how to do those things. So day 2 was something else. Our keynote speaker for the day was, there was an issue, and it was interesting because I don't think anybody really expected it to happen. And I'll say his name because I think it's important that we all are aware. Dr. Malott, or Malott, Mallott. So of course the keynote speaker, that's, what kicks off the day. You're expecting something to be very informative, very enthusiastic, something that's gonna really, to not be too dramatic about it, but it's life-changing, it's something that really opens your eyes. So, the talk starts, and he's having some issues with the sound system. So, there's people rushing around to try to help figure out, what's going on with the sound. And he says, I had some really great Mexican jokes, but I'm not going to tell them because these Mexicans are helping me with my sound. And it was hard for me to hear. I was way in the back. It's a very big auditorium. I'll post a picture before the video so you can see how big the auditorium was. So it's kind of hard for me to hear him. And I was thinking, did he actually say that? So he said that, and I was surprised and kind of in disbelief, I guess, and trying to convince myself that that wasn't what he said. So I continued. I sat and I listened. He continued to speak. At one point he said something else about Mexican people. He said, if only Trump were here, right? So immediately I was off put. And that I knew he said. And I saw people start to leave. So the talk that he was supposed to be giving was about rule-governed behavior. So I think that the assumption from most of us there was that he was trying to do something with rule-governed behavior and trying to make a point. So I kind of looked around at people around me. They were kind of looking at each other like, oh, I don't know, this doesn't feel right. So then he proceeds to pull up a picture of somebody who got proposed to at, last night at the or the previous night at the conference. And then he talks about how he recommends that people don't get married, which is fine. It's his opinion. It's fine. Because, then they get distracted, and women, once they have kids, then they're done. They're, unable to really be in the workforce, which I found offensive, but, again, it's his opinion. And then he said, but those bitches don't listen to me. And that, I knew he said that, and I couldn't in my mind, rationalize it. So he continued, and he said something else about, um, not, he didn't want women in his PhD program because, they just get married and have kids, but he eventually let them in because his program was so small. Um, so at that point, I decided to leave because CEU is not worth hearing hate speech or justifying hate speech, because by being a bystander and allowing it to happen, you're saying that it's okay, and I was not okay with it. So I left. I saw a lot of other people leave too. So, in the hallways and passing, I was talking with some others and getting kind of their reactions about it. And people were very upset and very uncomfortable. Some people were saying they didn't want to come back to CalABA again, that this kind of ruined the whole thing for them, that they're done. But honestly, that's not how I felt about it. Probably like 15 or 20 minutes after I left, I was on the app and I saw that he had gotten pulled from the stage, so that they had, they stopped his talk and removed him, which, hey, thank you. I don't know what else was said after I left, but I heard that didn't get any better. And then also on the app, the president of CalABA issued a statement apologizing and, saying that we don't tolerate that kind of language. And so I felt very proud in that moment. I felt proud of our organization that they took a stand against it. I also felt proud of my colleagues, because a lot of us did walk out and a lot of us didn't tolerate it. So I think that really speaks to, who we are as a group. And I wouldn't say I'm not going to go to CalABA anymore. I'd say, of course I'm going to go to CalABA again. Of course I'm going to support what's right. Even if, this person is a doctor, they have their PhD, it's not, this kind of talk is not okay, and it will not be tolerated by our organization or our profession. So I felt very proud of that, but it definitely was a fiery topic, and a lot of people were really worked up, understandably so. I felt worked up about it. So it was kind of hard to transition to our next seminar, but I guess they ended up having a free CEU at lunch, where everyone could come and kind of debrief about what happened. And I don't know exactly what was said there. It filled up, so there was only a certain number of people who were able to get in. It was kind of one of the smaller rooms, so I'm not really sure. I hope that they release a recording of it or something, because I'd like to see what the overall response was from the panel. But so that was the drama of CalABA, in case you were interested in that. I know that there's now a petition going around to boycott this person from ever presenting at another ABA conference. There's also people coming out and saying, well, they're not surprised that he spoke that way, that's kind of how he always speaks. I thought maybe it was a joke, like maybe he was, having a bad day and, decided to speak this way, but I guess not. I guess that's, it's kind of known for him, so, which is disappointing. It's highly disappointing, but that's enough time of talking about that. So the next seminar that I got to attend was the aging population with behavior problems, which I was really excited about this one because there's so little research and talk about what happens when our students age out of the system and age out of the services that they have, or they become adults who have severe aggression and problem behavior. So I talked about functional analysis and the importance of doing that, even as, these students are now adults and maybe they're in care facilities or group homes. We still need to look at using those functional analysis strategies to find out what is the function of the behavior, why are they engaging in this behavior, what are they looking to gain from doing this. So it's important to still do those things. It's important to stay true to our research. We are looking for more research. There's not a lot of research out there compared to what is known for the littles. So it's important that, more research is done on this population, more strategies are developed for this population, but really going back to the foundational principles of behavior, looking at reinforcement, looking at motivation, looking at shaping and chaining, and using task analysis. And then we had on that panel Dr. Rachel Taylor, whom I love, was speaking, and she talked about the regional center services, and specifically like the laws around the services that they're provided. And she wanted to kind of inform us of some updates that are coming from the regional centers. So again, very beneficial information for us to have. She talked about new policies. There's an increased demand for behavior analysis for adults with developmental disabilities, so they're trying to create some new policies around this using self-determination and person-centered planning. So using, the team meetings and behavior analysts as part of those team meetings to determine what are the best next steps for this person, the person being able to have the final say in what they want in their plan, in their trajectory. Also the final rules. So the final rule was something that started in 2014. It's for home and community-based services. It ensures that the individual can reach the greater community. It focuses on employment, shopping, and just really accessing things in the community that they need. It ensures that you operate by federal rules, and it influences services that the individual is eligible for. So that's something, again, that I think is really interesting and important for us to know. So I plan to do some more research on that, but I really appreciated that she brought that up to us. And then she also talked about training. So if you're a supervising BCBA and you're training aspiring BCBAs, it's really important that you especially dealing with severe problem behavior, that you're the one on the front lines, that, this is not a population that we get to work with very frequently. There's not as big of access to services for that population as there is for some of the little ones or some of the ASD diagnoses. They're able to access services pretty readily, but some of the older population, or maybe their ID, they don't get access as easily. So this might be the first time that some of your supervisees are working with this population. So it's important that you're kind of on the front lines and demonstrating the skills and taking the punches if you need to, because they're still learning. So it's important to note that as well. And then lastly, Dr. Rachel Taylor also talked about the importance of not using layman's terms, but using our behavior analytic terms. She talked about how it's important to use those terms because it establishes our field as a science, and deviating from that can leave a lot open for interpretation. So instead giving the term and then giving the definition of the term or explaining what that term means. I mean, you don't want to talk like you're speaking in another language, but you do want to give them that terminology, and it empowers our field, but it empowers the individual as well. They can say, I'm using this technique and this is why. Instead of just saying, oh yeah, I'm saying good job to him every 10 minutes because, that's supposed to help. But no, it's actually, reinforcement, and that's what reinforcement is, right? Talking about the long-term effects of it so that they can do a little bit more explanation. And really, if you teach that foundational knowledge to the general population, that's going to sustain more with them. Once they get the concept, they can generalize it and use it with other students too. And I've seen that happen with teachers, where I take the extra time to explain to them, what does chaining mean? What does it mean to chain, skills together? How do you make a task analysis? And then they're doing it next year with students, and they don't have to call me in. Now they're doing it on their own. So just taking that extra time can really help to get get behavior analysis out there and help them use the language that, has been researched and is very specific to the skills that we're looking for. So that's it. That's CalABA. That was a lot. But I want to share it all because I love it and I think it's great, and I feel so empowered now and ready to go back out into my field and do what I know needs to be done. So thank you guys for listening. If you went to CalABA, let me know. We can chat about it. What you thought. If you went to any other seminars that you really liked, if you went to the ones I went to and you want to talk about them a little bit more, that would be great. So thanks. Have a good one.